Hey, I'm Sil, they, them. I'm your friendly neighborhood leftist vegan autistic nerd, and I'm going to have a hard time maintaining eye contact with the camera while reading off my script. And yes, this is indeed a sock on top of a pretty big microphone because I don't have a pop filter. Anyway, I figured I'd make a video about my unique PvE playstyle in Pokemon Go because it may sound appealing to other vegans, or really anyone who would like to try an immersive way to play the game that treats Pokemon, Mons for short from now on, as ends in and of themselves rather than as means to one's ends. If you have limited to no experience with Pokemon Go, worry not, for there will soon be a quick primer section just for you, which knowledgeable players can easily skip. If you wish to try this playstyle for yourself, you're obviously free to tweak it as you like, so please keep in mind that my methods are just my personal preferences and are not meant to be an exact prescription for anyone else. Also, I don't consider PvP as part of my personal narrative, and I play it rather normally, so everything I talk about from now on is within the realm of PvE mechanics specifically. On top of that, I personally play with 0 microtransactions, and this playstyle is perfectly feasible with or without them. Finally, I personally use a third-party app to help me inspect Pokemon stats faster, but it's by no means required for this playstyle. I'll be making clear distinctions between what happens on the screen in-game and what happens in the narrative within my mind as I play. A primary example is that while on the screen, I obviously use Pokeballs to capture Mons and then release the ones I don't want. What happens in my narrative is I encounter a Mon in the wild, try to briefly interact with them, and if there's no connection, we just both continue with our lives. So here's the quick primer I promised for those who need it. If you don't need it, skip ahead to this timestamp. So number 1, IVs, or individual values, are randomly generated innate stats that all Mons have. They range from 0 to 15 in this game, in attack, defense, and HP. A 100% IV Mon, or a Hundo, is a Mon whose stats happen to roll 15 in all 3 categories. Number 2, strengthening Mons in this game boils down to resources, species-specific candy and stardust, both of which you can accumulate over time by catching Mons. Theoretically, if you're swimming in resources, you can turn a level 1 Charmander into a level 50 Charizard within a minute. 50 is the maximum level, and you only need XL candy between levels 40 and 50. Number 3, Team Rocket is in the game, and they infuse Mons with Shadow Essence to drive them mad and fight for them. When you defeat a member, they leave one of the afflicted Mons behind, and if you catch them, you can purify them with some Stardust. Number 4, the game has a friendship mechanic with Mons, and the highest tier of connection you can achieve with a Mon is called Best Buddy. Number 5, and lastly, gyms are spots that players leave their Mons in to defend. The longer a Mon defends a gym, the more coins the player gets, which they can use to buy upgrades and useful items. Okay, so now that you're primed, let's get into the playstyle itself. So what are the actual stipulations? I would say the 2 most important elements of this playstyle are consent and natural growth. When it comes to consent, I stipulate additional mechanics of chance into the game in order to simulate different desires and preferences for Mons to have. Chief among them is the chance that a random Mon in the wild would even wish to join me in the first place. When thinking about wild animals, it's safe to assume that unless one has something to gain from interacting with a human, they would rather just be left alone and lead a free life in the wild. Cases where a wild animal would attempt to join a human's life are extremely rare, and so the simulated odds I have chosen for this mechanic are respectively small. I'll get to that in a little bit. Quick side note, even though some Pokemon species are based on domesticated animals and man-made objects, the fact that we encounter them in the wild in the game makes it simpler to just treat all of them as if they are wild animals for the purposes of this playstyle. With those points in mind, for a Mon to wish to join me, it makes sense that they would seek some kind of assistance or benefit from it. Off the top of my head, I can think of quite a few fitting examples. Perhaps the Mon is struggling to survive in the wild and wishes to get stronger so they can later return to it and thrive. Perhaps the Mon dislikes the burden of surviving in the wild altogether and wishes to live comfortably with a human until further notice. Perhaps the Mon is interested in sport battles and wants to train with a human for that purpose. Any kind of narrative where the Mon wishes to join me of their own volition can work. But how do I simulate such rare odds? I could just pick some lucky signature number between 1 and some other big number and use a random number generator to roll every time I encounter a Mon in the wild, but that would be a lot of work. Instead, I use IVs to simulate that rarity. The odds of a wild Mon to have any specific IV combination is 1 in 4096. I could decide on a unique signature IV combination, which would serve as indication that a Mon who has it is interested in joining me, but instead I went with 100% IV, or hundo, because that big round number is a huge dopamine hit. It also makes thematic sense to me that a strong emotional bond between a Mon and their human partner would lead to excellent results in sport battles, so the strongest IV combination makes sense for that. It also bypasses the issue that low IV combinations are impossible to find from many sources due to boosted IV floors. This, of course, means that when finding a hundo from sources with boosted IVs, I would have to roll additional chances in order to simulate the original rarity, at least roughly. Depending on how much effort the source requires and how rare the species is, I stipulate additional RNG rolls with ranges anywhere between 1 in 2 and 1 in 20 in order for the Mon to join me. For example, because raids require extra time and effort as opposed to wild encounters, I often stipulate an additional 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 roll. Whereas, if I find a hundo from a very easy task and their species is rather common, it might be a 1 in 20 roll. If a hundo is from a super rare species, exclusive to other regions of the world, or exclusive to eggs, I just accept them without extra rolls. Another side note, here are the ways I incorporate the following in-game mechanics into my narrative. Number 1, a raid is simply a battle with a wild Mon who wishes for a challenge. Number 2, a research task is just like any other wild encounter. Number 3, an egg hatching is just like any other wild encounter because I'm anti-natalist and I don't feel like dealing with extra births in this narrative. Also, many animals usually consider the first animal they see after they are born to be their parent, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense for newly born Mons to not want to join me, and that would be a recipe for disaster in this playstyle. Number 4, I divorced the in-game purification mechanic from the narrative, and as far as I'm concerned, all Mons from rocket battles are recovered and liberated as soon as the battle is won. Anyway, let's say a Mon has managed to break through all these odds and has just decided to join me. Now what? Well, we're not done with elements of consent just yet. The first step is to respect whether or not they're interested in sport battles such as gyms and raids. I think it's safe to assume that not all Mons are interested in those, and so a coin flip is in order, or a 1 in 2 roll. The important part in this is that Mons who are not interested in sport battles are not any less deserving of care than those who are, and so every Mon in my care receives equal time and effort for their growth. We'll get to the mechanics of growth in my playstyle in a little bit. Since rocket battles can be stressful fights with high stakes, namely liberating Mons from exploitation, Mons who join me get an additional 1 in 10 roll to indicate whether or not they wish to abstain from rocket battles. The odds for that are small by default because I imagine most friend Mons would not be too afraid to try and help. Of course, a Mon may change their preferences regarding both types of battle in the future, and so at the start of every year, I ask them if anything has changed in the form of a 1 in 10 roll for each type. Another kind of choice that Mons should be able to make for themselves is what form they wish to end up as in terms of evolution if they can evolve at all. We know some Mons simply don't wish to evolve, even if they are interested in sport battles, and we also know that there are unevolved Mons who are old of age. In other words, evolution is not necessarily linked to growth. Therefore, another immediate step to take when a Mon joins me is to ask them what form they wish to end up as. I use a roll of 1 in X, where X is the number of different available forms the Mon can have, excluding mega evolutions, which are temporary. For example, for a Ponyta, it would be a coin flip. For a Charmander, it would be 1 in 3. For an Eevee, it would be 1 in 9, and so on. Alright, let's move on to the second key element, growth. how do I simulate it? Something that's always bugged me, in Pokemon Go in particular, is that Mons hatch from eggs at level 20, while Mons in the wild can be found at levels as low as 1. In order to simplify the playstyle, any new Mon friend I find at a level lower than 20, I level up to 20 immediately as a baseline. Their growth process goes all the way up to level 50, but it could just as well be 40 if I didn't wish to deal with the challenge of finding enough XL candy. At any given time, my active training party consists of the 6 oldest Mon friends who can still level up, and the rest remain on a waiting list. By oldest, I mean the ones who joined me first. I find that focusing on a small party leads to stronger emotional connections with each Mon. Every time I go out on a serious walk, one of them joins me as a walking buddy, and at the end of the walk they gain 1 level. Which, by the way, consists of 2 power-ups because for some godforsaken reason there are half levels in this game. After each walk, I rotate to the next party member until one of them hits the maximum level, at which point they are considered a veteran and are replaced in the active party by the oldest waiting list member. I like to imagine that once a Mon becomes a veteran, they either go to spend the majority of their time back in their original habitats, or at my home, or whatever fits their aspirations in life, and I can just summon them whenever there is a battle they're interested in. For the sake of challenge and incentive to earn a lot of trainer XP, I also stipulate that the max level of my Mon friends can't surpass my trainer level. For example, as my current trainer level is 42, my veterans are level 42 as well, and as I level up, their cap increases accordingly. This means that whenever I level up, I take a quick break from my active training party in order to have one walk with each of the veterans so they can level up to the new limit. If I don't have enough candy to level up a Mon, their growth process is put on the back burner until I do, but thankfully that hasn't happened to me yet. So when do Mons evolve? If a species has 1 tier of evolved form above it, for example Ponyta to Rapidash, they can evolve at level 35, which is halfway through the growth process. If a species has 2 tiers of evolved forms above it, for example Charmander to Charmeleon and then to Charizard, they can evolve once at level 30 and then a second time at level 40, which are a third and 2/3 through the growth process respectively. If a Mon joins me whose level is already above an evolution threshold, and the role for their preference regarding evolution indicates that they wish to be evolved, I evolve them immediately, and in my narrative, it's as if I met them in their evolved form in the first place. Similarly, if a Mon joins me whose level is below the threshold for their current evolved form, I immediately level them up to the respective threshold, and in my narrative, it's as if I met them at the updated level in the first place. And that's pretty much it for the growth category. Now, we finished going over consent and growth, so technically that concludes the core of my playstyle. But here are a few miscellaneous elements that I employ as well. Trading is a non-starter in this playstyle, not only because trading sentient individuals is very commodifying, but also because I can't think of a narrative reason to send away Mons in my care to other people. I do use trades in a way that is divorced from the narrative, only for the sakes of XL candy acquisition and research task completion. Speaking of which, because I separate the on-screen process of catching Mons from the narrative in my mind, I sometimes keep non-hundos for the sakes of tasks, trading, and PvP in an out-of-narrative manner, and I never use them in anything related to the PvE narrative. On any day that I play actively, I try to go through every friend Mon who is not yet a best buddy and quickly earn easy hearts with them via feeding, petting, and taking snapshots of them. This includes Mons in the waiting list, of course, because they also need some care, even if they're not trading yet. Unexpected turn of events, there is now a dog sleeping on the couch behind me. When it comes to sport battles, I tried my best to prioritize weaker friend Mons in order to have fair, challenging fights, as well as in order to give them time to shine, as opposed to veterans. Because almost all legendary and mythical Mons are supposed to be one of a kind in the world and often have significant domains of influence over the world, I'm still torn on whether or not to incorporate them into my playstyle at all. One option, which is the one I currently play by, is to simply exclude them from the narrative because it feels very unlikely that such creatures would want to join the life of an average trainer. Another option that I might adopt in the future is to consider hundos of legendaries or mythicals as minor aspects of the real ones, similarly to how, spoiler alert for Pokemon Legends Arceus late game, skip to this timestamp if you wish to avoid it. Okay. Once you defeat Arceus, they bestow upon you a minor aspect of themselves to employ as a member of your team. At any rate, I'm not in any particular rush to adopt the latter approach for multiple reasons. Number one, I'm not a fan of legendary and mythical mons as a whole. Number two, I usually have my regular dedicated walks by myself with music, and I barely ever go out of my way to meet up with other players just for the sake of high tier raids. And number three, getting XL candy for legendary and mythical mons would be a massive pain in the butt. Though, I suppose if I ever wish to have better chances in Master League PvP, I'd have to go for them anyway, so we'll see. And one final element, I exclude the on-screen concept of defending gyms from my narrative because it simply seems a bit weird to me. But, since I want coins for upgrades, I often just leave random non-hundos in them in an out-of-narrative manner. Perhaps in the future, when I have more veterans which I could assign to gyms, I'll come up with a narrative element for it. Maybe that way, veterans who are interested in sport battles but are seldom summoned can get more time to shine, albeit passively. That's all I can think about for now. If I come up with more stipulations or ideas to update my playstyle with in the future, perhaps I'll create an addendum video to this one. Thanks for watching.